Welcome to the Dallas Sierra Club. Do we have anybody here that's a first timer that's never attended one of our meetings before? Raise your hand, please. Okay, well, up at the front table where Ginger is, raise your hand, Ginger. We have some forms we would like you to pick up, and if you don't want to join, at least you can get our e-newsletter for free every month, and that'll let you know what's going on with the Dallas Sierra Club. And after you read one of those, you'll want to be part of it, I'm sure, and then you'll join the club. Okay, before anything else, I want to mention that recently, since the last general meeting, Green Source DFW held their Environmental Service Award Banquet. And two of our very own, two of our finest, received prestigious awards, and I just want to mention that. Hey, where are you going, Kirk?
He doesn't want to be recognized.
Okay, well, Molly Rook, who I know is here, received the award for Lifetime Achievement. And that tall, lanky guy that just ran out, where did he go? Well, let's give him a round of applause. He'll never hear. Okay. Kurt got. Kurt Miller received the Helen Bush Award for Unsung Hero. You all, if you don't know who Helen Bush was, she was our long-suffering secretary who passed away on last Easter. So those are two prestigious awards, and we're very proud of Molly and Kirk. Okay. Now, you've been looking, I hope, at the slides as they've cycled around to see what's going on, and we're going to start. We're going to start with our committee reports now. And let's start with Ginger, Membership Committee Chair. You have anything to say? Like you've got shirts for sale, calendars for sale?
Yeah, we still got the big calendars, small calendars, and we have the polo shirts and the regular shirts, and these are only $12 this year. The shirts are 10 and 15. And don't forget the Sierra Club party this Sunday at El Phoenix. There's going to be a bunch of swag, all free stuff, and we're going to give away a bunch of camping stuff and just everything. So come on out to El Phoenix. Check it out on DallasSierraClub.org.
Which El Phoenix?
Check it out on DallasSierraClub.org. The Castle Linda one.
That's the one at the intersection of Garland Road and
You know what it is?
Buckner. So she was referring to our annual Christmas party, to which I assume all Sierrans are invited. And it will be on Sunday evening, December 15th, from 6 to 9 at the El Phoenix, there at the intersection of Buckner and Garland Road. It's just north of the Arboretum. Okay, next committee, let's do conservation. Here is Dick Gouldy to handle that.
Thank you. We have a new conservation effort that we'll be undertaking next year to help DART in planning bus routes. It turns out that one of the main sources of pollution, air pollution in Dallas, is transportation, and one of the best ways to do that is to improve bus riding, and the best way to do that is to improve the routes so we get more people on it. There's a whole series of things that are planned to find the best routes, but one of them involves getting community input. Community input will be in the form of groups that meet throughout the city for a small, maybe a one-time 4-hour type thing to evaluate some proposals and make inputs and decide which are the best proposals to send forward. And we want people from all over the city. So the reason I'm announcing this is so that you can start thinking about if it's something you'd be interested in, or if you know somebody that you think might be interested in it, and particularly if you know people from other parts of the city, in the east and the west, that we don't reach. If you know those people, tell me tonight, but if you don't, there'll be a further call. Part 2 of conservation, let's bring up Olinka Green and Marcus Russell.
Dick,
Yes?
just a minute, they're gonna be last. Next, we have Molly Brook.
Molly Brook is going to talk about
The global climate strike.
Yay, Molly.
Well, and I know that some of y'all were at the climate strike, and some of you spoke there. So those who attended and spoke, would you please stand up? Yay! Thank you. So what this was related to the global strikes, particularly the strikes by the Fridays for Future group, students that have been striking for a while to bring attention, as Greta Thunberg in Sweden had started this, to bring attention to people, students and people who were there encouraging adults to strike from work to bring attention to the climate crisis. And the timing of it, this last one was to bring attention to the conference in Spain, the UN climate conference, the COP25 Conference of Parties on the climate agreement to make hopefully improvements to the Paris Climate Agreement in terms of implementation of it. Because we need to do everything we can, because all the studies keep showing that we're running out of time, and that we need to accelerate our actions because the climate impacts are accelerating faster than we had anticipated. So these students, it's amazing what they were able to put together. It's really exciting to see that the students are doing this. And so some of them took off from school to come there to speak, and they put a lot of time into organizing it. This here is Jonathan Cartwright there in front. He's a senior at Townview, and there was also a rally at Townview High School that afternoon for the ones who couldn't leave campus. They had planned to, but the principal had different plans at the very last minute. So they managed to scramble and put together a rally at their school that had around 200 people there. So it was really exciting that people, both the adults and students, gathered around to talk about what we need to do to have climate justice. So this is just the beginning. They're going to be organizing more. They're networking with other students. So you're going to see this growing. Thank you.
And now, I'd like to introduce Olinka Green, who will tell us about the ecological devastation bus tour that she organized, that we partnered with her. And that was,
Hi y'all, we're gonna get that together.
yeah, that was next year.
Okay, hello everyone, I'm Olinka Green and this is my team worker, Marcus Russell. We did, with the Poor People's Campaign, we did an ecological devastation bus tour, and we went to 5 sites in Dallas, and West Dallas, Sand Branch, and Joplin, that have been impacted by environmental pollution. This is Lane Plate, this is a Superfund site that's lead, cyanide, mercury, mercury, and chromate on this, in this area, which is in Highland Hills, which is a poverty-stricken community. Marcus Russell, he was able to get us at least 20 families from the communities to get on the bus. We found Reality and Sierra Club to help us get a 52-passenger charter bus, and we were to go to all these different areas that have been impacted by poverty and environmental issues. So this is just some of the slides of the places that we went. We went to Sandbridge, and that's a community right outside of Dallas. There has never been running water in that community. We met some of the people that have like a 12-foot water well, and they have to go and they have to get water up from the well to flush their toilets. And this is in Dallas. This is right. Yeah, and this is Jockey, where it's they're affected by concrete batch plants, where 89% of the people there have some type of breathing problem. We have Shingle Mountain.
You had it on earlier.
Okay. We went to Shingle Mountain. Mr. Marshall Jackson's backyard, where there's a 60-foot toxic mountain made of crushed shingles. It's
The top picture there.
the top picture there.
The top picture there was taken in September
Okay.
of 2017, and the bottom picture was taken in November
So this
of
is
2017.
so this
That's
is
how fast that
this is a
that
mountain.
land was destroyed.
yeah, this is Shingle Mountain. So you see over here, you see up there where the land is just green and everything. That's the before, and then you come this way. This is the aerial picture. This is the bottom picture of it. And while we were there, we met a man who just moved in, and Miss Marsha Jackson's horses have died. She's suffering from throat issues, spitting up black film. Her children are sick. We met a gentleman who just moved there. His horse died. So this is the before, and this is the after. So as we were there, people could not, we heard about it, but people could not actually believe it till they actually saw this. Yeah, okay.
That's all the pictures.
And so that's all the pictures.
And we also had the Dallas Observer documented along with PBS also came and documented. We had a lot of speakers come, ministers, people running for Congress. We had a lot of community activists come speak, so it was a Mr. Benny, so it was a very educational, informal trip. And hopefully we can do this again with the support of Sierra Club. We appreciate y'all for everything y'all done.
Amen. Thank you. Two passenger buses. We were able to bring community members, and they were able to sit and talk about what was going on. So we really appreciate y'all's contribution, and hopefully we'll be able to do it again. And we thank Holy Cross for giving us the opportunity to use the parking lot. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Who's next?
Me. Next, we're going to do the Outings Committee, and Mark Stein will do that, who is the chairman of the Outings Committee.
All right, the Sierra Club does outings. We go dormant during these weeks around Christmas and New Year's, but we're going to break that in January, Saturday, January 11th. We've got a good hike coming up at Eisenhower State Park near Denison. Jim Binnings is going to lead that outing. In early February, we've got the Big Bend National Park bus trip to backpack and hike there, but we sold it out. On the other hand, if you're really quick, you could be number one on the wait list. And between you and me, we typically will take one or two people at least. Last year we took 4 people from the wait list. So if you're interested, go ahead and register. Your odds are pretty good of getting to go if you act quickly. And in February, our famous Backpacking 101 class is being offered on Saturday the 15th. Sweet day, right after Valentine's Day, making this a great gift card if you want to give it to someone for Christmas or for Valentine's Day. It's $40. It's an all-day class from 10 to 4, and it's the best introduction to backpacking or refresher course in backpacking, and we'll talk about what we do when we go backpacking, what gear you need, tips on getting gear and making it less expensive for you. I would strongly encourage you to take a look at the Dallas Sierra Club website, read about it, and register for the Backpacking 101 class. We'll have some more outings, both beginner backpacking trips and day hikes as we get into spring, and it appears now that we're going to make our Memorial Day weekend bus trip to hike and backpack an excursion to Bandelier National Monument in New Mexico. More about that in the late winter.
Thank you, Mark. Liz, do you want to say anything about ICO?
Stay tuned. We're working on some things so that we'll be able to get geared up for the new year. But
Okay.
some exciting, I think things are looking good. Just
Okay,
let me
Deb.
know if anybody's interested in the outreach program to get the underserved kids into the outdoors. Just let me know.
ICO stands for Inspiring Connections Outdoors, right? Took me 2-3 years to get that right. Let's do, David, do you want to say anything about the political committee? Oh, there you are.
Very briefly. Yeah, I'm in the dark over here.
Yeah.
Didn't find the lights or something. Yes, David Griggs. I'm the political chair for our group. And all I want to mention is that next year, as you know, is a really big year. Yesterday was the filing deadline, so we now know who all of the candidates are for the various races, and we will be very much involved in many of our state house and senate races, railroad commission, and so forth. So in January, I'm hoping that we can have some voter registrars here, or at least early in the year, to make sure that you're registered so that you can vote in the primary. Either party's primary is on March the 3rd, so be sure that you plan to vote in the primary of your choice on March the 3rd, and we'll help you find the candidates that we feel that are the most pro-environment. We'll be letting you know about that. So stay tuned.
Thanks, David. Have I left any committees out other than the program? No? Great. The next will be our program co-chairs, and Victoria Howard and Renee Robertson, and they're going to introduce our program for this evening.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad everybody came out. I know it's very cold. Today is this is a going away party for this guy. And it's a welcome party for these, maybe a little bigger, but this is the last time you'll see these here. If you see one, it's because somebody brought it in. But we're getting rid of these because they're plastic, and we need to practice what we preach. And then these are the paper ones, and I'll probably go a size up, but we're trying to get rid of these, and we want to promote that. Yeah, bring your own reusable cup for water. We have water filling stations out there. Okay, and without much further ado, we're going to get our speaker introduced so we can get on.
Just a quick announcement and welcome. I'm Victoria Howard, as Dan nicely introduced us. I want to remind everyone that next month's program is going to be Marcus Russell, who you met just a couple minutes ago, and he is going to be talking about his group Commissary is Very Necessary, and this is going to be really, really wonderful to hear about. We'll hear more about the bus tour and the work that they're doing in South Dallas County, and also bridging the gap and what we can do more to help with the environmental devastation and the environmental inequality in our southern parts of Dallas. So please, please come back in January. That's the second Tuesday, January the 14th. Without further ado though, for tonight's program, we are going to welcome Susan Alvarez, and she is with the City of Dallas. I'm sure you've seen our slides going by. She is going to give us the absolute latest and greatest about the CCAP, the Comprehensive Climate, Energy, and Action Program. I apologize, it's a mouthful. And so, Susan, thank you so much for being here, and we would love to hear from you.
You to find me.
Yes. Okay.
And it should be.
There we go.
Yeah. Cool.
Here we are.
So thank you so much for inviting me to come and talk with you tonight. I've tried to mix it up. I see a lot of familiar faces, and I will tell you the first thing I want to say is thank you to the Sierra Club. Without your advocacy, the city of Dallas would not be doing a climate plan, and we would not be standing here right now, and I would not be standing here right now talking to you about it. So thank you so much for pushing your respective elected officials to think and do more about the environment. And I hope you will continue to do so, because realistically, doing the plan is the easy part. Implementing it is when it gets interesting, and that's really when metal hits the road, is when you start trying to do the things that sounded good when you were planning them. And so we need your continued support. And with that, I'll dive in. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background. I don't want to go too far into the weeds on that. We have done probably almost 200 meetings. And depending on where we are, there's a variety of interest in a variety of subjects. But one of the things that we get a lot of pushback on is the economic case for doing climate planning. So we have some stakeholders from the U.S. Fed office in Dallas. They have 402 PhD economists that have done a white paper on climate change. And I've pulled the part of their paper that I can understand, because I'm not a PhD economist. So I've got some of that for you. And then I have the latest, greatest of what all we've been doing with the climate plan. So we just met Friday. Friday morning, we met with other local cities that are also doing climate change or climate planning in their respective towns. In the afternoon, we met with both city and business, education, public health. Alinka was there. Molly was there, of course. Some of the advocacy groups, housing. We all met in the afternoon and looked over the draft goals and the draft objectives and picked them apart. And so this is kind of what's left. In fact, I don't have everything back yet. We're still trying to make some sense of it. But I wanted to give you the latest, greatest on where we are and where you can find more information on what we're doing. So with that, how many of y'all were in Dallas or in North Texas in 2015? Yeah, most of you. So I remember it because I spent most of that month either in a pickup truck scouting areas that were flooded. I spent a lot of time in West Dallas, or I was in the basement of City Hall in our emergency room. We went from level 3 drought with all 4 of our reservoirs upstream of Dallas, pretty critically down to about 25% of yield, to uncontrolled overflow and flooding in the period of a month. That has never been seen. I spent some time with some crusty old hydrologists, and they were scratching their head because what happened in that month was beyond statistics. And so that was kind of like our wake-up call that maybe there's something going on with this climate stuff they're talking about. The other thing that came out beyond a couple more 100-year storms and twice our annual rainfall that year is there was a very quiet study that was done by one of the professors at ETA, and he was looking at modeling impacts of climate change on infrastructure, railroads, roads, airports. He's an academic, so he took 140 pages to say y'all are toast. But what we started looking at is there's something we got to pay attention to. And at that point, we started pulling together the data to do a local greenhouse gas inventory for Dallas. Mike Rawlings, in 2017, signed the city of Dallas to be a climate city with the U.S. climate mayors. So he made that commitment then. I love the first sentence. I think it's absolutely true. So realistically, yes, they're talking about pulling the U.S. out of the climate accord, but realistically, 90% of the action plus is at the city level. 2/3 of the emissions are coming from the city. We use about the same amount of power. most of the populations, if you look at those handy red and blue vote maps, most of the people voting are in cities. The other thing that's more critical, and it's where we learned those lessons in 2015, is when something goes down, it's not Washington that's there holding the bag. It's the mayors, it's the departments, it's the cities that are on the ground that have to react to what Mother Nature is giving us. And so there again, it's like, well, if we're gonna have to deal with this, we need to plan for it. So we joined the Climate Mayors. I sat on a call today. It's actually up to 438 climate mayors, so we're not alone in this. And we do have regular calls with the other cities that are doing climate planning. In Texas, there's a handful in Texas as well, and we talk to them probably about quarterly, not as much right now because we're all scrambling to get our plans done and going. And then locally, there is a handful of cities in North Texas, don't believe what they tell you, but there are cities in North Texas beyond Dallas that are climate planning. Friday morning, we had a 4-hour meeting with those cities to try to organize a North Texas regional greenhouse gas inventory to use to plan regional climate adaptation, I'll say. For the North Texas area. So we're excited about that. If you do not live in Dallas, I would suggest that you do what the Sierra Club did to Dallas. Go talk to your city council people and tell them they need to be doing something. And eventually, like ours did, they will. So the other thing is, I mentioned this already, need to talk a little bit about the business case. This is actually the roof of the Dallas Fed. I love it because they have a green roof, and this was before it was fully grassed in, but it's a dollar sign. And on the ground, you can't tell because it looks like benches, but it's kind of cute from the air. So I've been in the Office of Environmental Quality for about a year. My first week on the job, I got a panicked call from our controller. And she had gotten a call from Moody's, who does our bond rating. They do all our finance. They're basically our bank. Moody's wanted to know not if we were doing anything for climate, but what we were doing and how are we addressing that risk. And the controller's like, can I just tell them we're not doing any of that green stuff? And I'm like, no, let me make some phone calls. And about 20 phone calls later, I realized that the city was actually doing quite a bit, and they were doing quite a bit of the right thing. It's just that nobody really knew about it. They were just very quietly doing the right thing for the right reasons, partly to save money, but partly to help make their operations more smooth and more environmentally friendly. What we found is that Dallas was number 3 to New York and San Francisco for money spent on environmental resilience. Most of what we're spending is related to drainage and water supply, and that's basically where we have the largest risk as well. So with that, the other little piece of good news I've got is my friends at NOAA compile disaster data. And this is a place where I'm not sure we really want to be, but Texas is number 1. We lead the country in losses related to weather-related storms. And we are in the top 10 of every single category they count, including winter precipitation. So the preliminary estimates of public and private loss from just the tornado we just have are over $2 billion. So that we can add some more. So we can look at it as cost to pick up, or we can proactively spend some money to kind of protect our community, and that's what we're looking at. One of the other things that's kind of interesting, can you tell I'm an engineer and kind of a nerd? I like bars and charts and numbers. So this is billion-dollar events from 1980 to 18. The green ones are severe storms, so every now and then. And here's where we are in 2018. I don't have the 2019 data yet. And you can see that the last 3 years are around 300 billion a year. These are national, not Texas. But even so, it's a lot of money that we're spending on storm-related damages. Okay, so when people started asking us for an economic basis beyond what we're paying to clean things up, we were talking to one of our stakeholders from the Dallas Fed. He's like, oh, we've got a white paper on that. And they gave it to us. And what they basically showed is the top line is percent loss in US GDP under the ideal 2.5 model scenario. This is status quo. So about, and actually it extends down in the report. They say it's between a 14 and 15% drop in the GDP. Now I did a presentation at Mensa and they tried to argue with me that the GDP is outdated. I'm not a PhD economist, and so I'm not going there, but just to say, and these numbers are basically from all 10 sectors that they measure as far as productivity. So there's a significant economic basis for climate planning beyond clean air and water and that stuff. So in Dallas, this comes from the National Climate Assessment from November 2018. We're in chapter 23, the Southern Plains. It's about 1,600 pages. It's a great summer read. Not really. So what we're concerned about is poor air quality, going from drought to flooding like we did in 2015. We're looking at an annual temperature increase, and I will say this year so far has been the warmest on record, as was last year and the year before. The other thing that we're concerned about is down in this lower corner, an extreme heat increase and extreme days. Extreme days are 100 degrees plus. So we're looking at potentially 1 to 2 more months of the worst part of summer. And so that, even if we have community gardens, nothing much grows when it's that warm. And so we're rethinking a lot of things right now. One of the other things is when City Council asked us to do a climate plan, they said it has to be effective, it has to be actionable, and it has to be equitable. This is also from the National Climate Assessment. Unfortunately, and this is worldwide data, but it's valid in Dallas, the communities that are the least able to deal with the impacts of climate change are the ones that are impacted the most. So communities of color, low-income communities, elders, children, the folks on the bus tour, unfortunately. And so when we do our planning, we have to specifically look at, does this plan address these communities' needs? And are we doing the right things in the right place? That's hard. It's real hard. So here's some other mapping. This comes from the Smart Cities decision tool that the Trust for Public Lands did. This is poverty. This is commute, less than 30 minutes, and this is African American communities. See any trends? So, fortunately, we have the maps. We have data so that we can do data-driven planning, but we have a whole lot of work to do in the next couple of months. So we also have a new mayor, and everybody wondered how he was going to be, if he was going to be on top of this environmental stuff. I don't know. He's a new mayor. He's coming from the state. You never know. He's absolutely on board. His third day in the job, he went to the U.S. Climate Mayors meeting. He spoke. He gave us this, and he set us up with our very own committee, which is the first time that Dallas has ever had a committee specifically related to the environment. So we're taking the Resilient Dallas plan that was finished in 2018. We're now moving on into climate planning. And with our council committee, he actually gave us 3 mandates. Global leader in addressing climate change, create and oversee the CCAP, And the third and probably most important, but it's not on this slide because it is a whole different other world, is to address environmental inequity, particularly in South and West Dallas. And so those are on our radar. We're looking at them. We had staff on the tour, and we're working to get those sites cleaned up. First Monday of every month, All Environment. It's on the 6th floor of the City Hall. It's open. Anybody can go. So, a little bit more math and science. This is from our 2015 emissions assessment for the whole city. It forms the basis of our plan. This is Dallas, and this is looking at C40 cities and comparing us. Our largest source of emissions, like Dick said, is our transportation segment. However, commercial energy, residential energy, and industrial image, only 5% is from waste and water. So we're a little bit different from the other cities because we have a little bit less industrial. But the good news is the emissions are coming from places that we can identify and fix, or the majority of the emissions. We compared ourselves to other cities across the U.S. We're right here in the middle. There's Austin, here's Houston. Now the secret of this slide is that this is total emissions. This is a 2015 data. If you divide it, emissions per capita, we're actually at about 14 tons per person per year, and we're trying to get to 2 by 2050. That is a significant reduction. So we're gonna have to rethink a lot of things, and it's gonna take a lot of work, and we're grateful for ahead of time for whatever help we can get. So we're down here in the plan. We are actually doing some modeling to see if what we're looking at is planned measures, get us to where we need to be. And we're in the process of developing, vetting the ideas in the plan. We've got a pretty good list. We put them through the meat grinder on Friday. We're kind of reforming that list based on the impacts or the results we got from that. The one thing that's of concern is that Dallas does not have a municipal utility for electricity. And even if we went all electric, some of the data that our consultants provided us show that because our electricity comes from a grid that is predominantly coal and gas fired, it's going to be extremely difficult for us to get that complete jump down to net zero by 2050. So again, it means we have to look a little bit bigger picture than just Dallas. We probably need to look at pretty widespread renewable energy, again, beyond City of Dallas generated. So we have spent, I call it the traveling roadshow. My staff and I have been to over 100 meetings. It's actually closer to 200. We've had pretty close to 10,000 people. One of my young scientists built a website when she was theoretically out on medical leave because she was bored. But we've had people from all over the world beam into the site. I will tell you that's our repository. All of the information from all of our meetings is there. I don't know if Friday's stuff is up yet, but it will be before the end of the week. If you're interested in anything that we're doing, it's there. If you want monthly newsletters, you can sign up for emails and we'll tell you when we add new things to the website. But it's a great repository of information. So community feedback, this is very general. In the buildings and energy, a lot of support for alternative forms of energy, a lot of support for more efficient energy. Transportation, Dick already kind of beat me to this one. It's big time on public transit. It's getting people out of single occupancy vehicles. It's more efficient, effective mass transit. and alternative fuel vehicles. Waste management, we had a lot of feedback supporting expanding recycling and expanding composting. We're okay with that. Both of those are in our zero waste plan. We had a lot of feedback for nature-based solutions. We had a lot of feedback for urban ecosystems and expanding green space. Because of the ability to sequester carbon, we're looking at these pretty heavily. And then, remember I talked about that study in 2015 about our infrastructure? Well, this last spring, how many of you have ever lived in the Midwest? Besides me. So last April, when it rained and rained and rained, those farmers were really worried because they could not get their crops in the ground. And that was a big red hairy flag on the food category, because that's a climate change thing affecting food. This goes beyond food deserts. This is food for everyone. And how many days supply do we have? And if the infrastructure goes out, what do we do? So, and remember that other slide that said 1 to 2 more months of 100 degrees? We're not doing a lot of community gardening like that. So we've got to rethink some things. So, we also got almost 10,000 individual response. That was my summer and then my fall reading. Because we did read and we did try to figure out, are there any trends in the comments we got from the public. So this is kind of a quick synopsis of some of the other ideas we got. And some of them we'll do, some of them we won't. The net zero neighborhoods we absolutely are looking at. We're looking at tall and small to get a greener footprint at the ground level. And we're doing some work with the Planning Commission right now because we've had 2 or 3 things come up where we like parking a lot. And if we're going to try to get people out of driving by themselves, we have to make it less convenient to park. Additionally, we've done some work with some of the apartments related to getting the multifamily recycling ordinance implemented. And only 40 to 60% of the parking at multifamily is being used right now. So why are we requiring people to build this parking that just sheds water, doesn't really add much value? So we're looking at some things, maybe we trade off, maybe we trade off and have them do permeable pavement and gardens for some of the parking and do less parking. Some things like that. So we're looking at some different things. From all of the community input we've had thus far, we have, I think, 8 different primary focus areas and goals. I'm not going to read them all to you, but when you look at these, some people can say, well, is this stuff a city should be doing? And I would answer absolutely. Even the food, because if you think about it, one of our concerns is our police department, and we're concerned about rising crime. If people don't have a secure home, if they're hot, if they're hungry, they're not going to be model citizens. And so realistically, it helps the community as a whole if we can take care of basic needs like that, or at least get things set up so that those basic needs can be taken care of. So our approach to planning, it is a climate plan, so we've got mitigation. We're looking in each one of those focus areas. We're looking at things that can reduce emissions, things that can help manage the risk of climate change. And then there's things like water conservation, water quality, local food production, access to food. Are we properly addressing food waste? And right here in the middle is my tree, because trees belong in all 3 of those. They help sequester carbon, they help reduce heat island impacts, they help, because they soak up the water, they help with flood response. And so it's kind of one of those trees are the answer things. I don't know if there's a bumper sticker there or not. But so anyway, we're looking at, in each segment, pieces of this. So the overall objectives that we have so far, is to increase energy efficiency of existing buildings. We will be jacking up our code to the 2018 International Code so that all new buildings are net zero, a little bit more carbon neutral. And the other thing that we're looking at, and this came from the tornadoes, is to increase our resilience. We lost power twice through major storms. In particular, on the tornado, we lost the rec center where we normally shelter people. We had to wake up the retired park director at 2 in the morning to open up Bachman because that was the closest shelter. Bachman has 2 walls that are glass and it's located in a floodplain, and we had additional tornadoes predicted. So we need to take a look at some of our buildings, at least on the municipal side, so that we are able to address basic community needs in an emergency like that. We're not there. And they had lost power, and the answer to power is to haul a diesel generator down the street and use chainsaws because the trees are blocking the street to get the generator to the new building. So no. We need some batteries, we need some alternative forms of energy because we're not resilient. This is one of my favorite sites in Dallas. It's the Da Vinci School. Lovely wind turbine. They've got solar here. That's a nice water conservation, and they've got pavers so that the water soaks into the ground. It's a very green building. So this is reliability and weather events. The city just did a green energy policy in April. We're extremely proud of it. We also negotiated a new energy contract with TXU. That contract saves us about $8 million a year. We can use those savings to, in turn, generate on and off-site power so that ultimately we can get from using 100% renewable energy credits to our own generated power. And so that's our internal plan. I have a meeting tomorrow morning with some nonprofits to look at community grids because we need to set up places, and this gets into equity. We don't want people to be energy poor. 58% of the people in Dallas rent. So those landlords may or may not be excited about putting alternative energy, but we need to find a way to make that happen. Transportation, we talked about a little bit. We want to move in fuel-efficient vehicles, reducing trips where people drive on themselves. This is a big, big deal, and that's synergizing land use and housing with transportation so that you don't have to travel from South Dallas to Plano to get to your job. We've got some projects planned where we're trying to do a better job of mixed use with jobs and transportation, mixed income housing, and food all in one area. We're looking at that for a project to redevelop the Naval Air Station, actually. Water resources, this is 2015 again. So our Dallas Water Utilities actually does a pretty good job. They plan ahead 50 years, and on an ongoing basis, they do incorporate drought planning and flood planning, both. The flood folks just moved into Dallas Water Utilities. They are pulling together a capital plan. And the reason being is that our risk from flooding is not in the Trinity River floodway. It is not in the areas near downtown that are protected by that floodway. It's in the neighborhoods where our drainage might have been built in the 20s or 30s, might have been built to a 5 or 10 year standard, and it's old and it's undersized, and that's where we have our risk. Unfortunately, those are in parts of Dallas that have been built for a while, and so it's going to be extremely expensive to fix. So they are doing a capital plan to fix the neighborhood drainage. You may have seen the Mill Creek Tunnel. That project is really expensive. It's really important. It probably provides an outflow or a place for the water to go for about half of Dallas. And we can't fix the local neighborhood drainage till we have a place for the water to go, which is in that tunnel. So they've got a plan, they're working on it. We're trying to get them, that's one other thing that they've done that's kind of cool that most people don't know, is they put a cogeneration unit on their sludge digester at the treatment plant. And it's about a 300 million gallon per day treatment plant. It's huge. It's a lot of stuff that goes through there. They're pulling the gas off and using the power of the sludge for about half of the energy of that water treatment plant. That's huge. We want them to continue to expand that. I'm like, put some panels on your clarifiers. Because they do use a lot of energy, but I guess what I'm saying is we need to look at that water energy nexus, because it takes a lot of energy to get the water to us in our homes. There may be ways of making that cleaner and greener as well. Last but not least, nice windrow compost. Zero waste, we do have a zero waste plan. We're in the process of updating it. We have the multifamily recycling ordinance, goes into place January 1st of 2020. From that, we're expanding most likely into composting and business recycling. One of the things we found out from our business survey that was done for this plan is 53 out of the 60 companies that responded were already recycling, which is exciting. That's the good news. The bad news is we only had 60 responses. And if you're a statistician, that is not statistically relevant. So I don't, it's anecdotal, but probably not critical. But we do want to make our waste system more efficient. We do want to generate energy from our organics. One of the other things that's kind of interesting is that while sanitation is updating their plans, my friends in parks, because they had to deal with a lot of trees from the tornado, started composting in 4 different areas around the city, and that way they're not hauling all the compost to the landfill. They're treating it pretty close to where they need it. And so we're working with them on a grant to get a new chipper, because they're very effectively helping us get that composting going. Food is a new area, and I came from a meeting with the Oak Cliff Veggie Project to here. So remember I said about the Midwest and no food? So we are looking at expanding local options for food. We have several challenges. We do have existing food deserts. We do have a significant piece of our waste stream that is food waste that can be better utilized by people or animals or compost. And we have a supply chain on our food that is not, it's not resilient to these larger events. So we've got a bunch of challenges. We are building a food council. We are doing an urban ag plan as a part of this. Stay posted, because we will likely need some folks to serve on that food council. I've got your name. I've got your number too. So this is it's a new program to the city. We're excited about it. We just did a food innovation challenge with our Office of Innovation. And I think they've got some projects that have been funded that we can pilot to see if they work before they roll out. So we have probably 4 or 5 departments actually working in the food piece right now. Clean air. So this is one that has originally it was not in there as its separate measurable thing, because most of the activities in transportation, most of the activities in both the urban environment and the buildings and energy sector help air quality. That said, we're currently working with TCEQ to get a new monitor, a permanent regulatory monitor down by Joppy. We're also working on 3 or 4 different projects, including one with Dr. Larry, to do what, it's called non-regulatory monitor because it's not the 50,000 big honking air quality monitor, but it does give localized data, which could be useful. And it could be helpful to us in figuring out where we need to add more trees, where we need to figure out something different with the traffic so you don't have people idling. So those two projects are, it's actually two on that first bullet, but those are really important and those are projects that we're already started working on. Ecosystems, and that is basically a greening of Dallas. When you look downtown, this is Clyde Warren Park, which is lovely, but everything around it is concrete. There's a lovely word that I just learned that sounds dirty, but it's not. It's biophilia, which is like green walls, green. That just sounds nasty. It's not. It's green walls, it's green roofs. It's trying to provide a more planted surface. It will help us cool our heat island impact. And it'll, I think, aesthetically be a lot friendlier to be around. So all of these actions, for each one of them, each one of the ones I talked about has about 4 or 5 sub-actions. Each one of those is going through a sieve with, is this something that came from the community? Is it something we're already doing? What about the equity? Are there equitable impacts from either implementing or not? Does it work? You know, is it going to get us the bang for the buck we need? Is it expensive? Are we coming up with great ideas that are hopelessly expensive that we can't afford to do? And then are there things where it really, we need to kind of take an adaptive management approach? So next steps, Councilmember Narvaez very cheerfully said he wanted to deep dive on each one of our meetings. So the next 3 meetings of his committee, we're going to be tackling these things. We are already working on a green procurement, and that gets more into circular economy. It kind of pushes that button. Water resources will be at the next one. I'm anticipating that these 3 will be February, and these 2 will be in March. So here's our overall timeline. We started back here, Earth Day 2019. This is where we did the initial public meetings. What do you think? This was the most recent October ones where we dove down a little bit into specific actions. This was the powwow we just had with all our stakeholders. So we're anticipating a review draft that will be out on the street in February. And I hope that you all will take a good look at it. Tell us if you like it. More importantly, tell us if it doesn't work for you or you hate it or you have ideas that we can do better or differently. And then what we're looking at is April 22nd, 2020, which is Earth Day, the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, is on a council day. And so we are planning to do our resolution to accept the plan and implement our plan, our climate plan on Earth Day in April. So this is our website. It's fabulous. It's great having young staff members that are very talented that can build websites for you on their sick leave. No, she did a great job. And with that, that's all I have.
Ginger, could I ask you to turn the lights back on? Okay, we have plenty of time for questions. So let's have some questions.
I'm going to start here and work my way around. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I noticed that in the parking lot behind City Hall, you have some car charging stations.
Mm-hmm.
I live in Richardson, and I'm trying to make contact so that Richardson puts a few car charging stations in their parking lot. How do you go about doing that?
This is very easy actually because VW got caught maybe not being truthful on their emissions testing. And so a part of the settlement for that lawsuit was to provide funding for different alternative fuel measures. The funding in January is for EV chargers, and they're looking at that 45 quarter COG is. So I would contact the city of Richardson, and I don't remember who's there now, because we stole their environmental person. She's fabulous. She came from Austin, it's Farah Andrews, and she implemented Austin's first climate plan, so we brought her in to help us implement our climate plan. And she could not be here tonight, but she's all kinds of great. But contact the city of Richardson. Alternatively, if you contact Lori Clark at the North Central Texas Council of Governments, it's lori.clark@nctcog.org. They are administrating the VW settlement monies in North Texas. And the January let is for EV chargers. So we're hoping to make use of it as well. Yes, sir.
Kansas City just made their public transit free. They talk about making free public transit because it'd certainly be a lot more riders.
I can talk all I want about that. Unfortunately, DART is a separate political entity for me. And so I can ask, and we pay our percent of our...
In Dallas, the 1,000-pound gorilla in the room on DART?
We are, and actually that conversation did come up with our stakeholders, and I have no problem asking them. It's worth an ask, and it does. I mean, you're right. You are absolutely right.
Right now, it's creeping up, and it seems like the price is creeping up and the ridership's creeping down.
Well, and I live on a bus route 6 miles from downtown. I can walk half a mile, wait, oh, there it is, 15 minutes later, hop on the bus, and I get the scenic route through Oak Cliff, and I get to downtown about 45 minutes later, and then I walk another half mile to City Hall, and it takes me an hour and a half to go by bus for something that I can hop in my car and do in 10 minutes with traffic. And so realistically, what we have to do is what a lot of other cities have done. You're right, reduced fares. I did see an announcement where DART was going to reduce fares for SNAP participants, and I don't remember what else. They're looking at it, but it's reduced, it's not zero. The other thing is that same parking lot across from City Hall is I think $1 or maybe $2 a day to park. If you make your bus fares cheap and you make your parking horribly expensive, that bus looks a whole lot more attractive. And so there's some things like that that we need to look at. Yes, ma'am.
No, I was gonna piggyback on what he was saying, because that was my issue, is that DART is constantly changing, and they just did something else, because my sister's complaining it takes her 30 minutes long to get home. If you want to decrease, because when I drive to work, I drive alone. I can drive it in 35 minutes.
Yeah.
If I get on the bus, and there's a bus stop in front of my apartment, it's 2.5 hours. It takes me, I have to catch the bus at 6:07 to get to work at 8, and I can drive it in 20 minutes.
We need to get her talking to DART. So yeah, so we are in conversations with DART outside of the normal official, we're talking staff to staff. They do have a consultant on board that just redid Houston's, they redid Portland's, and they redid Seattle's bus routes. Buses are probably the most flexible, and they're not cheap, but it's a whole lot cheaper for buses than it is to do fixed route trains. And they do give you some flexibility to change when your land use density changes. And so I think, personally, this is me, Sue speaking, not the city of Dallas, I think that we have some opportunities with DART to improve our transit system so that it is more flexible and more useful to the people that might use it. So.
When you state your question, be loud if you can, otherwise I'll have to repeat it, I think.
Okay. Sam.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions, but the first one is related to, are you setting a particular target for what kind of percentage reductions or total reductions in greenhouse gas you want to achieve by a particular year? Because
Yes.
I came here from Texas recently, from Washington DC, and because we had targets,
Mm-hmm.
we were able to hold the city accountable to pass legislation to meet those targets because their current programs.
Yes, so we, as a climate mayor, we automatically have a target of net zero by 2050. What we're playing with right now, remember I said we're doing some modeling, we're looking at the 2030 and 2040 targets to see what's doable, what's realistic. The other thing that we've built into the plan, and I think it's important, is we're basing our plan on 2015 data. We've actually implemented a whole bunch of stuff between 2015 and now. So we plan to update it with 2020 data, and then every 5 years thereafter. We have, I think I said close to 10,000 comments on what we needed to do. We're building the plan as is, but nothing goes off the plate. And as we look at these future greenhouse gas inventories, if we're struggling to meet our targets, well, then we start ratcheting up what our actions are. And so there is an adaptive management piece that I think is critically important. The other thing that both the mayor and the council member Narvaez asked us to do is to set up a dashboard so that it's very transparent. Here's where we are, here's what we're doing, here's how we're doing. So that it's not, you don't know how many times I heard, don't give us a stinking plan that sits on the shelf. So it's gonna be an active plan. We are gonna have to revisit. Councilmember Narvaez has said he's thinking about a council of some type with like quarterly meetings, again, to kind of hold our feet to the fire, to make sure that we're implementing on a reasonable schedule.
That's great. My second question was related to your comment about the energy grid and what you're dealing
Mhm.
with, that shifting to electricity doesn't always make sense if you have a lot of coal use and fossil fuels in your energy grid.
Right.
And so I'm wondering what the city is looking at to influence the investor-owned utilities to shift the energy mix. Like in Indianapolis, we were able to get the city council was able to get the utility to close down a coal plant, for example, by getting the city council to pass a resolution. So are you looking at ways to pressure the utilities?
Yes. A lot of that ends up being quasi-political. So we will be in Austin, we will be working with the PUC, and we will be working with our electric providers. Additionally, Texas law has some preemption statutes where we, as the city, unless we set up a formal municipal utility, cannot compete with the existing folks that have the franchise in this area. Well, I guess we could pay $40 billion for the lines, but so we have to figure out, we have to be pretty creative on creating some microgrids at the neighborhood level, so that we're not competing with the existing franchise utility. But the people that need the power have it at a reasonable cost and can stay cool in the summer and warm in the winter without emitting. Yes, sir?
Recently, there was a study that came out that showed that renewable prices dropped so much so quickly that new renewable is cheaper than new natural gas.
It's true.
So as it's dropped quicker and lower and lower, why would we not, as you know, Mayor Leppert financed the downtown construction projects left and
Mhm.
right. Some of them are still good and some of them bad, but it was financed. Why don't we finance those projects? Because I just bought solar for 8 cents a kilowatt, as much as I want, out of a mass solar facility out in Midland, Texas. So why don't we finance those, get a guaranteed return, because you're going to be buying it back. And what you get back goes back to the pension plan payments that get themselves back on their feet. We get cleaner air. I think we should go electrification. I think 100% electrification all over. But if you get clean sources, and as it makes money, you buy another one, and as it makes another one, and you're seeing it happening overseas tremendously.
Yeah.
If we were to look at something like that, to me, it's almost a no-brainer. It's easy to make money when you've got a guaranteed return. return coming back?
We're looking at that. The other thing that we're looking at is energy efficiency for the buildings has about a 90% return. It's extremely impactful to make your buildings more energy efficient. So we're looking at that first and using, remember I said that contract, we had an $8 million savings per year. So that's a 10-year contract, it's $80 million. We should be able to construct our own renewable power generating with some of that. And that snowballs. I mean, I put solar on my house. My bill this month was $6.05. So I'm thrilled. I think everybody should have power bills like that. What?
When you do it commercially, it's way cheaper than that and much
Yeah.
more efficient. And then when the hailstorm comes through, you're gonna rip your entire roof off and put it in the solar and put it back on, which I had to do 3 times.
I'm sorry about that.
It is.
It happens. It is something we are looking at. We just have to figure out how to do it within Texas state law.
And TCEQ just cut that funding by 40%. If you're not aware, just recently.
For what?
Last Monday, they cut back financing of TCEQ by 40%.
Cool.
That was,
I'm glad I don't live in Houston anymore.
It's just those monitor systems are what they're cutting.
Yes, ma'am.
When we were doing CCAP, one of the things we talked about was, in transportation, we talked about different ways to, cut down on gas house emissions and the gas in the community. And they were talking about, scooters. And, the electric scooters. And, one of the things that we brought up was that in the city, like where we live at, scooters, we can't do.
There's no sidewalks.
Right, because there are no
Yeah.
sidewalks. There's no
Yeah.
sidewalks, and there's no bike lanes for that.
It's
in
an
that
equity
area.
thing. That's a fix that we.
Yeah, and so that's what we were saying. And so
Yeah.
scooters, you know, you can't be on the side. You know, you have to be able to drive. You know, be able to be in the streets with that. And then we also talked about, I think it's Kansas City or Detroit or wherever it's at, that just did a free transportation.
Yeah, like you mentioned.
Right, free
So-
transportation.
Yeah, one of the things that came up in the community community surveys, both for the strategic mobility plan that's running in parallel to our plan, and then our own plan, and I didn't go into it in a lot of detail because it's in that urban ecosystem piece of it, is that one of the things that is kind of a barrier to people being able to walk, bike, even scooter on streets is sidewalk infrastructure and shade.
Right, and and another we do on there is that, I don't even think they thought about, was that we were talking about police, is that, you know, you have people on these scooters, that's a problem, that's a
Yeah.
problem. And, just say with transportation, brought up in the meeting that it would be good if we, in places where there's food deserts, if there could be transportation of buses, free buses that could take people from the area to grocery stores.
Yeah.
We could have a bus service that could take the people living in the community that have diabetes, all these health disparities, to the
Hypertension.
satellite clinics.
Yeah.
So that was some of
Those
the
are great ideas.
that I passed out, that I said that is some of the ways that we could basically, and it would be in areas where we don't own cars. And so when we see that, like you said, with the heat, we see a lot of people walking to save a lot. It's 100 and 200.
And they have their umbrella?
No, even not even umbrellas.
Oh, wow.
Walking from Save-A-Lot to the apartment complexes, and even when we're catching the bus, and last year we did a survey with DART, we found 30 bus stops in Southern Oak Cliff all the way to Pleasant Grove where there's no shade, and the bus stops were made out of concrete, so you try sitting on that when it's 104, 102 degrees outside. So we even did, we talked about DART, the elephant in the room. We got a bucket, and we took pictures of us sitting on this bucket at the bus stop, and we painted it, and we took it to DART, and we said, this is what we have to sit on when we catch the bus. And we even went so far as to do pop-up bus stops. We would find bus stops that had no shade, We would take a tent, we would provide water, we would put chairs out, we would get refreshments, Gatorade, and people could sit up under the tent and wait for the bus. So that was very, very, so they finally gave us a bus shelter.
Yeah.
But it's a concrete bench. But because we did that, it made them realize we need to put out more shelters. We need to
Actually,
put out
that's the
more space.
one ask that Councilmember Narvaez had, is he's like, if you don't do anything else, if you can just make the bus stops so that they're shelters.
Right, and it's hard, like you say, in the winter, in the summertime, you imagine sitting on that, and it's like,
I've
because
tried
of
it.
the temperature,
Yeah.
you sitting on concrete. And so we
Not
asked
sitting.
to get that,
Yeah.
so, but they wouldn't give it to us, so we created our own.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell us one thing that we as citizens can do to help make sure it gets implemented? You said that that's going to be the really hard part.
It is going to be the hard part. We are trying to make, and I heard somebody earlier talking about sustainable. In the city world, sustainable means you're not asking for more money. So we will need your input. We will need your support. And I know there were members of Sierra Club, there were members of First Unitarian, there were members of Climate Reality that attended every single stinking budget meeting to make sure we were funded. Because this study was done out of the short-lived single-use bag fee. Our accounting department didn't do it correctly, and so they tried to cut basically that amount out of our budget, which meant we wouldn't have been able to be here. And so those August budget meetings are critically important, and I am grateful to every single person that went to those meetings and stood up and said, no, you guys got to do this. And I will say, the meetings I went to, it's like, you got to fix Shingle Mountain and you got to fund that department to clean it up. And so I don't know that you really realize how powerful your voice is, but it is. They listen. They have to listen. And, you know, after a couple of meetings like that, they'll go back and go, I had somebody in my meeting talking about, well, I had somebody in my meeting. So they do compare notes, they do listen, they do try to figure out a way forward. But that pressure, while it can be uncomfortable sometimes for staff, is extremely helpful to getting stuff done. So I just told you to come pester, come protest. No, Molly?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, we were talking about green procurement, and you were talking about the budget, and it made me think about how so many times when you're looking, not you, but cities, school districts, DART, whatever, they're looking at electric buses, electric vehicles, and they cost more upfront. It costs more upfront to put in the things for energy efficiency if you're retrofitting. It costs more upfront to put on solar panels, but on all those things,
They
you
pay
save
off pretty
money
quick.
in the long run. So how do we get it so that they look at the full cost of operation on all this, and then they end up buying the cheapest thing, which is renewable, which is clean, which is electric. But now it's separate, so you pay generally for something that's gonna be more polluting, gonna be more wasteful of resources, financial resources in the long run. So how do we change that?
I think it's just bringing attention to the life cycle cost analysis, which they teach you in engineering school, but you very seldom do afterwards. But in alternative energy, more than probably any other place, you see those paybacks fairly quickly. If you have a 30-year bond payoff and your equipment pays for itself in 5 years, you're looking pretty good. And it's 5 to 10 years now on most of the alternative equipment. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about the grid.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much control the city has over it, but does it,
Zero.
Okay, I'm just saying.
No, go ahead and ask your
Well,
question.
it just seems like the grid is set up to where it is not, it zings you if you're south. The light bills south are a little higher on a different scale. My mother runs the food pantry at our church, and people are constantly coming in there, and their light bill is $100 short of their rent or mortgage.
That's crazy.
And so they have to choose. And then, so everybody, I love summer, but everybody's dreading summer. So you're contracting with TXU. You can't get out of Walmart unless some of these other places are trying to get you to sign up. How are they doing $67 a month light bills when I'm paying $3 and $4?
I have no idea. But that is we have talked about energy poverty, if you will, having to decide whether you pay your energy bill or your mortgage. For folks that have breathing issues, they're on dilation, they're on CPAP, having that power on is critically important to basically life safety. And so that's where we're looking at maybe trying to find some ways of implementing community solar and some mini grids. For one thing, it would be a little bit more resilient. If half of East Dallas loses power, you might have power. The June 7th storm, there were 2 places in East Dallas that had power, Sonic and McDonald's. And so you saw all these people there charging their phones. That's crazy. So there's some things like that we're looking at. A lot of our power lines are overhead. So if we have a lot of trees, which we want because of all the other benefits, but our power lines go down because the trees aren't maybe maintained so well, maybe we put our power lines underground. Encore has said no, they're not interested in that because it's too expensive, but they're not necessarily, and this gets into Molly's life cycle costs. They're not looking at the full cost of having to send out crews on overtime to get the power back up multiple times a year. I think they'll catch up on that and probably start putting more underground. But so the power inequity, I don't know about the charging because with deregulation, there's so many different agreements and it is very confusing to go through them. Because they're all set up a little differently. And so to really get down to your kilowatt cost is challenging. What we're trying to do is figure out a way around that, particularly in areas where the power is expensive and where people may not have the means to pay a large power bill. So we're not there yet. I will tell you we're not there yet, but it is something we're definitely worried about, something that we're working on. Molly?
I just want to make a quick comment on that. Some of that why some people are paying more is because there's not enough insulation and they're paying more because of not having as much energy efficiency as would help on that. And unfortunately, Encore has an assistance program to help people pay the higher bill, but they don't help with insulation, which long term, you know, the city can help.
The city does have programs for that.
But to expand that further, to make that more available to people could really be helpful.
Yeah.
And the other thing, this is just a plug for people getting more opportunities to learn more about putting solar on their own homes. There's a solar happy hour next Tuesday night at sundown at Granada. So it'll be solar at sundown. That's kind of maybe
That's
help
a
you
bright
think of it
idea.
at the old Granada Theater from 5:30 to 7:30. And Solar United Neighbors is an organization
It's a
that's trying
nonprofit.
to help by pooling different solar purchases, a certain number of solar purchases. They can get multiple bids and try to bring the cost down for the individuals. And you can learn more about it if you want to come to that.
Okay. Thanks, Molly.
Okay, thank you very much, Susan. Now, before we adjourn the meeting, a bunch of us will go to the Blue Goose up on Midway, just south of Beltline, to eat, and maybe to eat some, I think we'll buy you some free nachos. That's what we've usually done. So,
This auto switch there somewhere.
okay, so the meeting is adjourned.
Dan, did you announce the holiday party?
Sure did.
Good. And you get a free margarita or a glass of wine there. So that's better than nachos.
Or whatever you want to drink.
Yeah. Or iced tea. You get a free drink.
Oh, yeah.
Where you go to power plant. Yeah.